Greetings, class. I'm going to go over chapter 1 from the book Gunfight, and it's a very short chapter, which makes it pretty easy. Chapter 2 and 3 are very, very long, but it's nice to start with a short chapter that really introduces our book. And one of the major things to look at in this chapter is paragraph 4. It's the page 4, and it is paragraph 3 down at the bottom, which has a Second Amendment. The Second Amendment in the United States gave Americans the right to own guns, and it all came down this amendment, which was written in the American Constitution, and it reads this. It says, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." So that's the Second Amendment, and I think if you're going to talk about guns, we have to start with that sentence. It's a very powerful sentence, and not enough people really look at it and understand it. For example, there's several words that stand out to me. One would be, if we go backwards, I would say the word infringe really stands out to me. And infringe means shall not be touched, which means that you cannot touch our guns. You don't have the right to take away our guns, and that is in the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed. It also, another key word in the second part of the sentence is the right of the people. And there's different words. For example, there are privileges and there are rights. So if you go to the DMV and you get a driver's license, they say that is a privilege. And what they mean by that is they can take that away at any time. If you drink and drive too much, they can take it away. If you speed too much, they can take it away. But a right is something that's given by God. A privilege is something that's granted by the state. So God-given rights would be your right to liberty, justice, things of that nature. And so they're saying that our founding fathers deemed that guns were a right of the people, not a privilege, which means they shall not be infringed. Which is also interesting because on some levels, some people are not allowed to own guns in America. If you've been convicted of a felony, you're not allowed to own guns. It's interesting that they say shall not be infringed, but they have infringed upon certain people, which is a very radical argument, but I think it needs to be said. A couple other words that really stand out. I would say free state always stands out to me. Free state. And remember that states were individual during that time, and they were free to rule on their own while being governed by the independent body of the United States. However, I think the free state is a bit strange because this was a time when not everybody was free. So African Americans were not free during this time, and they excluded African Americans from owning guns during this time. So I find it very strange that they were saying free state when the states were not necessarily free, and they were saying that this right shall not be infringed when they were infringing upon the rights of other people, which is interesting. And another couple other key points here. I really get stuck on, we'll get into militia. Militia is this. A militia has different connotations. In the founding fathers' time, like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, they believed that a free state they believed that a militia was the army. So, for example, during that time, the Americans didn't have an army. They didn't have a navy. They didn't have an air force, certainly, in the 1700s. And they didn't have the Marines. The people were the army. It was the people who fought the British. The people were the army. So the militia in that time were the people of the United States because they were the army. It wasn't until later that the United States really built an army, a navy, and all these other things that you would sign up for and get paid for. But in their time, a militia were the people. And then I think that idea has certainly changed. So, for example, militia today is a gun group. And I know that's strange to think about, but it's a gun group. And sometimes they can be more radical, but saying that for what it is, it's a gun group. We could form a militia. We're not, but we could form a militia where we have a gun club where every weekend we go out and shoot in the desert and we practice shooting. That would technically make us a militia. Now, some have become more radicalized, and we're going to be talking about militias in this book, but that's a key term to hold on to. And the other term that really stands out to me is well-regulated, because it says a well-regulated militia. And if you think about that, that's paradoxical, because on one hand, they're saying the militia should be regulated. The people who have guns should be regulated. And on the other hand, they're saying that it shall not be infringed. And I think that's really, really important to talk about because the Second Amendment is ambiguous. you could read it to say that the United States should be harder on guns, that the guns should be regulated, or you could read it to say that it shall not be infringed. So if you look at it, it's a very complicated amendment, but it's a strong start. It's a strong start to our chapter. It's a strong start to our subject, because our topic is all about this amendment. The reason why people have guns in this country is because of that. Another key term to get into for this introduction is District of Columbia versus Heller, which is on page 5. And that's very important because that was a Supreme Court case. And the Second Amendment very, very rarely goes to the Supreme Court, but in 2008 it did. And what happened was, Washington, D.C., it was the murder capital of the world, of the United States at that time. There were tons of people being killed with handguns. And what Washington decided to do was they decided to ban handguns. So you could not own a handgun in D.C. And it went to the Supreme Court. And I'm not going to talk too much about that because this Supreme Court case is woven throughout the entire book. You'll find it in every single chapter and what happens at the end. But it's important to talk about that now. Another couple of things to talk about would be the NRA, which is mentioned on page 7. I think that's important to at least talk about. Some of you guys may know what that is. Some of you may not. But the NRA is the National Rifle Association. It was started after the Civil War. And it was started to train people how to shoot. People believed that they had this belief that if people were trained on how to use guns, the Civil War would have been shorter. It wouldn't lasted that long. And so what they did was they wanted to train people how to use guns. And over time, the NRA became more radical. I think it's still very radical today, where they have this belief that any move towards disarmament or taking away guns, any type of gun control is a move to take away guns. And that's something to hold on to. That's something to think about. But they are mentioned here. And let's see. Yeah, I did mention a lot about the NRA that are brought up on the latter pages. I think another key thing to really bring up, this is the most striking part of this entire chapter. It says there are over 280 million guns in the United States. And those are guns we know about. And we have 343 million Americans. So if you think about that, the United States has a lot of guns. We almost have a gun for every single person. And I'm going to moderate. I'm not going to present my viewpoints on this topic. I'm going to show both sides as the best I can and let you guys decide throughout this paper. But here's a good argument. If you have the belief that we should take away all guns in this country, I think it's impossible. And the reason why, we just have too many guns. We have so many guns. And these are guns we know about. There's a lot of guns that aren't registered that we don't know about. And there are people who say that we should just take away all the guns in this country. I think that would be really, really hard, and I think that clarifies it. And there's a couple other key points in this chapter, but we went over the big things, and I think this is a really good introduction. And let me just say this. The reason why I chose this book, I love this book, and the reason why, one, if you're trying to do research on guns, it's really, really hard to find statistics, because the right's going to have their side, the conservatives are going to have their side, and the liberals are going to have their side. And to get accurate facts is really challenging, and I think this book does a good job of it. And I will admit our book is biased, but I think it shows both sides pretty well. And let me also say this. I started teaching this topic around 2012 after the shooting in Colorado at the movie theater. And I just thought that this was a topic we should be talking about in college. Americans love guns. We have a lot of mass shootings in this country, and people wonder why, what's going on, especially immigrants who are coming to this country. They have no idea why this is happening. So I think it's important to go over this. And in all honesty, I grew up with guns. My father loves guns. He owns over 60 guns. And I grew up with bullets and guns at the dinner table. I would go hunting with my father. I've shot deer. I've shot all kinds of things. And it was part of my life. It was part of my lifestyle. I owned guns when I was younger, and I never, ever thought about hurting anybody. And I would say now that I'm older, I really question, do we need so many guns in this country? And do we need the certain types of guns that we have in this country? So I'm saying this. I don't want to play sides. I'm going to try to just even it out, present a lot of different sides, and let you guys decide how to argue this in your paper. And also, I want to just verify this. I think our book does a pretty good job showing both sides. So I'd like to start here. Okay, thank you.